Adam, thank you. Take it away.
Good evening. My name is Adam DeVita, and I am your NDP candidate. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I have a degree in electrical engineering from U of T. In my career, I have written financial and performance analysis software for hospitals, factory automation, and data collection systems. I'm a big fan of making decisions based on evidence. I grew up in Richmond Hill and have my children here. I've volunteered in Richmond Hill in one way or another for over 35 years. I have a deep commitment to this community. I also have a certificate in preventive engineering and social development from U of T. This education is about solutions that are good for people, the environment, and business at the same time. And I must tell you that the NDP plan to fight climate change is really good. It is comprehensive, practical, detailed, and will create a lot of jobs while reducing pollution. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are fighting for you. On September 20th, you have a better choice. The past 18 months have shown that Canadians can confront any challenge when we have to, when we choose to, and when we come together. Liberal and conservative governments have spent a lot of the last 30 years cutting supports that should have been in place before the pandemic. Many of the issues in this elections are problems that have been left unsolved for decades. If we want different results, we need to make different choices. What we need now is the courage to act together. And that is exactly what New Democrats offer to Canadians. We can make life more affordable for people by investing in healthcare, affordable housing, pharmacare, and childcare. It is time to bring dental care, vision care, and drug coverage into the public healthcare system. This may help many small employers that cannot afford benefits. I worked in small business around here for over 18 years with no benefits. We want national standards for long-term care homes and to end the era of making profit by neglecting seniors. I look forward to discussing the issues with you tonight.
Thank you, Adam. Our next candidate to speak is Majid Jowhari.
Thank you, Janine. Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir and Mavich. My name is Majid Jowhari. I'm the federal Liberal candidate for riding of Richmond Hill in this 2021 election. I've also had the honor and privilege of representing Richmond Hill as a member of Parliament for the last 6 years. At the outset, I'd like to also echo what Janine said by acknowledging the land that we are holding this event on and the treaty that we are bound with. I'd like to also thank Board of Trade for facilitating this meeting and all the audience and participants. I'm a husband of 31 years, and hopefully that will continue. I'm a father of two. I have a daughter of 27 years old and a son 22, and they both were grown up in Richmond Hill and attended their education here. I've been a resident of Richmond Hill for the past 22 years, and I've been advocating for Richmond Hill. I'm your neighbor. Me and my office over the last 6 years have been working very hard, and we pride ourselves with upholding the following principles: accessibility, responsiveness, resourcefulness, proactive outreach, and a strong community advocacy. As most of you know, we have 5 community council that's been active over the last few years: affordability, seniors, environment, health, small businesses. I'm also seeing Richmond Hill grow and shared on the benefit of it, and also with this, some of the challenging that we've had, some of the challenges we've had. Because of that, I've been very successful in being able to advocate for important issues that's important to Richmond Hill. Start with the funding for fighting the COVID-19 to the tune of $7 million. Historical federal investment in bringing subway to Richmond Hill to the tune of $2.5 billion. Advocacy and consultation throughout the 5 councils that I mentioned. Funding for environment, green area restoration, and revitalization to the tune of $2 million. Again, federal funding for building a very resilient community. Funding for key city projects and supporting small businesses, and as well as making sure that we ensure that Richmond Hill is put on the map. The way we did that was through 2 things: advocacy for mental health and making sure that we pass the M36 motion. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay. And our third candidate this evening is Costas Menegakis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Costas Menegakis. I'm the Conservative Party of Canada candidate for Richmond Hill. I would also like to start by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, whose presence continues to this day. We thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. This election, this unnecessary and unwanted election in the middle of the pandemic, presents us with a choice between a comprehensive conservative plan to deliver jobs for all Canadians and restore public finances versus the reckless Liberal plan supported by the NDP, the Greens, and the Bloc that would have leave Canada with high levels of debt and unemployment. So it's a question of trust. Erin O'Toole and Canada's Conservatives are the only alternative to secure the future, restore comprehensive transparency and accountability to government, and ensure Canada is never unprepared for a crisis again. With the Conservatives, you will get Canada's recovery plan to secure jobs, the jobs lost during the pandemic. We're going to recover 1 million jobs during the first year. We're going to secure accountability by enacting a new anti-corruption law to clean up the mess in Ottawa. We're going to secure mental health through our comprehensive Canada Mental Health Action Plan. We're going to secure our country by creating a strategic stockpile and essential products and building the capacity to manufacture vaccines right here at home. We're going to secure Canada's economy, focusing on balancing the budget over the next decade. This election is about how we get Canada back on track, back on its feet, ladies and gentlemen, by securing our economy, our jobs, and our way of life. There is a simple choice. Canada's Conservatives will focus relentlessly on jobs, wages, and getting Canada's economy and finances back on track as quickly as possible, or the reckless Liberal plan who want unaffordable spending commitments that would leave Canada with unsustainable levels of debt and unemployment to pass on to our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start our panelist questions now, and we will start with Glenn Waugh asking the first question, and the order of answer will be Adam, Majid, and Costa. Glenn?
Okay, the first question is one that we like to ask first. Adam has touched on this to some extent, but the question is, what is it about you, yourself, your experience, your abilities, and so forth that make you a good candidate to represent us as Member of Parliament?
Adam.
Thank you for the question. Well, to start off with, I'm very good at creating safe spaces around me for people to come to me with issues. Often when you're at the doors, voters are like, well, why am I telling you this? It's just, I create that kind of two-way conversation. You know, I had an A average at U of T engineering in my fourth year, but I know that I don't know everything. So there's a certain amount of humbleness that comes with having classmates that are extremely smart people. So I take advice. I'm good to listen to, like I am good at listening to others. And I have a desire to have a keen understanding of what's going on and to understand the underlying issues that face us today.
Thank you. Next, Majid.
Thank you for the question. I think I addressed some of that in my opening remark, but really the role of an MP is to being a strong conduit between Ottawa and the constituency and making sure that you listen well and make sure that you deliver for the community. As I said, what we pride ourselves in is our accessibility. We've been accessible throughout the last 6 years. Our responsiveness. We've responded to over 8,000 correspondence and outreaches. We've been resourceful in helping small businesses, community members in accessing and understanding government programs. We've been proactive in our outreach. We've reached out to a vast array of stakeholders, and we've been a strong advocate. I talked about our 5 community council. It is true, understanding what their concerns is, that I can do an effective job in Ottawa. And that the effective job that we've done is around some of the programs that came out as a result of the 5 community councils, such as the Micro Fund for Small Businesses, as well as our strong position that we took on mental health and being recognized for that, as well as the great work we did around some of the social justice issues by introducing the M36, which is the Emancipation Day. I think we are proud that Richmond Hill will always be remembered for being in the forefront of mental health, as well as the social justices. and being a great advocate.
Okay, thank you. And next is Costa. And unmute yourself, Costa.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm a family man, a businessman, a proud dad, a proud grandfather. I focused the last 33 years in and around Richmond Hill. My business, my life, and my family has centered around this great town, which we now call the city of Richmond Hill. As the Member of Parliament from 2011 to 2015, I was a relentless advocate for Richmond Hill. There is a plethora of programs and funding that came from the federal government for Richmond Hill. I've always believed that an elected official sits in a borrowed chair. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the people that gave them the right to sit in it. That has been a guiding principle of mine in my life. As a lifelong volunteer in many, many different organizations, I believe in giving back. Giving back to my community here in Richmond Hill is a passion for me. It's not a job. I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking to give back to my community. I've knocked on every door in Richmond Hill so far in this election, and I'll continue doing it right to the very last day. I will be a constituency-focused MP, listening and learning and helping every family and every business in Richmond Hill that asks me for assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa. Our next question comes from Yo-Yo Jan, and our first person to answer the question will be Majid.
Thank you, Janine. So many Canadians don't actually engage in or care about politics, but our country is definitely better when governments address the needs of all Canadians, including women, young people, Indigenous Canadians, new Canadians, and people with disabilities. How would your party push forward the democratic reform to encourage greater engagement in the democratic process and include more underrepresented groups? Thank you.
Thank you for the great question. The democratic reforms and proportional representation has been something that's been on the agenda for all parties. Unfortunately, we did not in a position to be able to capitalize on that during the first mandate. As you know, what we heard from the deep consultation that we did was that everybody agreed on the proportional representation. We agreed on wanting a reform. But why we couldn't move forward was because we had issues with being able to define the format and the detail and the type of the electoral reform. And also the issue of referendum is a yes or no answer, which what you need to make sure is that question is asked properly. But what we are going to do, we're going to address that gap through all the programs and various programs that we are rolling out to make sure that the communities have the opportunity to be able to participate in this democratic process through various channels available.
Thank you. Next up is Costa.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, not all parties signed on to the proportional representation promise that the Liberals and the NDP promised back in 2015. Certainly the Liberals did not deliver on that promise, not surprisingly, because there's a lot of promises they did not deliver on. Part of democratic reform is ensuring that all groups and every Canadian, it feels part of the process. We look at the composition of candidates that we have on the slate this year, certainly in the Conservative Party. We have a representation of men, women, Indigenous peoples, people from all walks of life represented. We want to get people elected in Parliament, sitting in the chairs that are a representation of the multicultural mosaic that we so beautifully love in our great country of Canada. It's critically important that everyone has a voice. And in the Conservative Party, in our Big Tent Conservative Party, everybody is welcomed.
Thank you. And next up is Adam.
Hey, thank you for the question. So there's a bunch of ways that this can go, because there's a view of democracy out there as elect a tyrant. And there's another view of democracy, which is participation in government by the people. And in order to do that, we have to take a serious look at the systems of discrimination. Now, not all systems of discrimination exist because of meanness or malice. It's just the people that happened to be in charge at the time didn't realize that what they were doing was excluding people. For example, if you have a meeting at a bar at Friday night, 18-year-old voters can't show up, as well as some other religious groups. So I would like others to be in the same friendly, safe world that I live in. And there's a lot to be done to fight discrimination and racism in Canada, whether intentional or unintentional. As for electoral reform, New Democrats propose mixed member proportional representation. That's not the same thing as that they use in Israel, where the people get to pick
Adam,
the list, not the party.
your
Yes.
time is up. Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to confirm if the candidates can see the timer, the timekeeper putting up the 15 seconds and that.
No.
Okay. Maybe can you hide, Lucy is spotlighted and
Oh, there she is down there.
looking at the
Okay.
screen, you can
All
see it. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Our next question will come from Kenny, and the first person to answer that question will be Costa.
Okay. Other than the current federal subsidy program for COVID-19 relief, if you are asked to introduce a new program to help the economy recover, what would that be? What will be your main focus and how do you execute it?
Okay, thank you very much. That certainly is an excellent question. We have several programs in our platform that will be beneficial to Canadians and to Canadian businesses. Over the course of the pandemic, millions of Canadians lost their jobs, with women accounting for more than half of the year-to-year employment losses. The tourism hospitality sectors were among the hardest hit. To get our economy back on track, Canada's recovery plan will recover the million jobs lost in sectors hit hardest by the pandemic. Once the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy ends, Canada's Conservatives will introduce the Canada Job Surge Plan to get Canadians back to work. An O'Toole government will pay at least 25% of the salary of net new hires for the first 6 months after the CEWS ends. To help those who have been unemployed long-term, our plan will cover up to 50% of the salary of those who have been unemployed for 6 months or more. In the little time that I had, those are the two of the key points post-pandemic that we intend to bring in.
Thank you, Costa. And next is Adam.
So it's very encouraging to hear some of our ideas are being adopted across the aisle. So very good. I would like to focus on a general plan. Okay. Fact is that there's a lot of pent up demand and the economy could become roaring back after the pandemic is over. Note that the pandemic is not yet over. So that uncertain future, we do know that Canada needs to upgrade its technology to become more efficient with energy. New Democrats are offering low interest rate loans for building renovation. This will help both business and people to reduce or wipe out their carbon footprint. This will free up more money for consumers to be spending in our local businesses. And of course, the environment will benefit as well.
Thank you. And now Majid.
Thank you for that question. First of all, we need to finish the fight against COVID. We are 92%. We've recovered up to the tune of 92% of the jobs that they were lost. There are some sectors that there still need support, such as tourism, hospitality, and entertainment. We've made a commitment of $1 billion to those industries. Also, we are facing labor shortages, especially on the trade. And what we've made a commitment is to create 500,000 jobs for the youth, and under the co-op program that exists between the employee and the students, as well as making sure that we help small businesses modernize their systems. And we are also looking into supporting the highly, as I said, the highly affected sectors to more credits being made available. But the most important issue, we're going to create jobs, and we're going to make sure that there is support for hard-hit industries.
Thank you, Majid. Our next question comes from Cheryl. And the first person to answer will be Adam.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My question will be based on deficit in government spending. The Canadian debt is currently over $1 trillion and continues to climb. It will take a frugal spending on the part of our government to reduce this debt. What are some of the strategies you would implement to achieve this goal?
Well, thank you. So we do live in uncertain times. So we haven't set out a timetable to bring back to balance. However, we have set strategies to get us there in the long run. First of all, I'd like to note, if you took our debt and you multiply by the rate of inflation and economic growth, you get to a number. If the deficit is lower than that number, then the debt to GDP ratio will go down. So the finances of the country become more sustainable in the long term. So we plan to work with the parliamentary budget officer to make sure that our finances are stable. New Democrats do propose a few ways of collecting more revenue for services that we care about, such as a tax on the super wealthy, such as capital gains reform, and to look at other forms of tax credits that have in the past only benefited the very wealthy Canadians.
Thank you, Adam. Next is Majid.
Once again, thank you for the question. So I know you mentioned about the $1 trillion worth of debt, but a large portion of that has to do with the fight against COVID, and that was an investment. I consider it an investment in making sure that we as a country, we as people, we as small businesses, we as organization are kept whole and have been given an opportunity to be able to bounce back very strongly. So what are we doing? Specifically, we're going to make sure we create about 1 million jobs. With 1 million jobs, what's going to happen is the revenue of the government as a result of the collection of taxes is going to increase. Once you increase that revenue, you're in a position to be able to service your debt. Now, the other thing that we've done, we've effectively fixed the cost of servicing the debt over the next 10 years. As you all know, our service costs, debt service cost is fixed. And also because of the growth, we are in a position to be able to keep our GDP to debt to GDP ratio low and make sure that it goes lower. And therefore, we have a AAA rating, which is envy of the at least G7 or G20 countries.
Thank you. Costa.
Thank you, Cheryl. That's an excellent question. We're sitting today at about $1.4 trillion debt. We're paying $3 billion a month in interest, another $1 billion a month provincially. Canadians and Richmond Hillers know what we can do with an extra $3 billion or $4 billion a month. We can build a lot of roads, subways. We can build community centers. We can build schools. We can build hospitals. We can't keep adding to the debt arbitrarily the way the Liberals have. They can't use the excuse of the pandemic. We all knew that those measures were very important to get Canadians much needed assistance, but certainly they added over $120 billion in debt before the pandemic hit, and they have no plan to balance Canada's budget moving forward. We have a plan to bring Canada's budget back to balance within the next 10 years by, first of all, fixing the fiscal stabilization programs, giving every province a say. We're going to work together with our provincial partners to build a strong economy for Canada, to bring the budget back to balance so that we can pass on to the next generations at least that which was passed on to us.
Thank you, Costa. Our next question will come from Glenwa, but I just want to remind everybody that for all of the attendees here tonight, a number of questions have been submitted by various parties that are engaged in putting this together, but you also have the opportunity to ask questions. So please email your questions to the email on the screen, questions4rh@yahoo.com. And they will be sorted and we will be getting to those questions in a little bit of time. So right now I'll pass it over to Glenn to ask the next question, and the first person to answer will be Majid.
Okay, this is a bit of a change of topic. Foreign affairs. As everyone knows, we have what might be described as not a good relationship with China these days. Overall, though, the question is, what do you feel Canada's place in the world stage should be, and how would you propose achieving this with your party?
Thank you for your question. Our relationship with China is multifaceted. It's very complex. The way we've decided to approach that is around the principle that what I call the 4C principle. First, we're going to challenge China wherever we can, and against their violation of human rights with respect of their citizen, as well as the unlawful detainment of the two Michaels. We are also going to cooperate with China, where we have an opportunity to cooperate, such as environment, such as green energy. We are also going to compete with China, and how's that going to be? Is going to be we're given the fair opportunity to be able, we will compete through our small businesses and through our trade and make sure we are successful. And finally, we're going to coexist with China and work with them. The most important thing is our people-to-people relationship are very strong, and that will get us through some of the challenges that we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Costa.
Thank you, Glenn. A very, very, very valid question. Certainly, Canada traditionally, prior to this current Liberal government, was able to punch above its weight on the foreign affairs stage. We were a respected country, a country that when we spoke, we were able to drive other countries and be leaders around the world. Look at the calamity we're in right now. We're in the middle of a campaign during a time when people that helped us in Afghanistan, that put their lives on the line in Afghanistan, are being left behind and in danger. They became secondary to the principle that guides Justin Trudeau, and that's his own ego and potential for re-election and perhaps a majority government. We need to be taken seriously on the world stage. We need to focus on working with our partners. China is our second largest trading partner in the world. The Trudeau approach on China has failed. It's weakened Canada's standing in the world, not only with China, we've been weakened with many, many other countries. We want to go back to forging good, strong working relationships with our partners around the world so that Canada can once again be respected on the world stage.
Thank you, Adam.
So whether we like it or not, Canada has a small population, although a good economy. So we are a middle power. In order to exert influence in the rest of the world, we have to use a matter of respect, like we have to behave in a way that earns the respect of other countries, and we have to work with other countries that are like-minded with us. A new Democrat government will stand up to China with a strong and coherent strategy to defend Canadian interests at home and abroad. We will work with our allies to lead a robust and coordinated international response to China's disregard for the rule of law, something that goes back over 800 years in our culture to the Magna Carta. New Democrats will call out human rights abuses by China, stand with Hong Kong's pro-democracy asylum seekers, and provide coordinated support for those facing threats by Chinese entities here in Canada. We believe the Canadians have an important role to play in helping the world's most vulnerable. We believe in upholding the rights of women and girls will always be central to a new Democrat foreign policy, and we will step up with efforts to promote gender equality along with a strong international agenda to promote rights, security, and access to education.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you. Okay. And our next question comes from Yo-Yo.
Thank you, Janine.
And the first person, sorry, Yo-Yo, the first person to answer that will be Costa.
Sure. So many young people find it impossible to find affordable housing in York region. And what's your plan to address the affordable housing crisis in this region? Thank you.
Thank you, Yo-Yo. Excellent question. The cost of everything is going up, and grocery bills are up 5%. Gas prices are skyrocketed. Certainly, housing, as you mentioned, is a key issue affecting so many people, including my kids, my children, my own family. We are not building enough homes to keep up with Canada's growing population. This is a big part of why homes are getting harder and harder for Canadians to afford. There's a lot of foreign money flowing into Canada's housing market. So we have a plan. Canada's recovery plan will address these issues and will make homes more affordable for owners as well as renters. We're going to implement our plan to build 1 million homes in the next 3 years. We're going to review the extensive real estate portfolio of the federal government, the largest property owner in the country, with over 37,000 buildings, and release at least 15% of that for homes. We're going to build more homes for near publicly funded transit. We'll provide more Canadians with a path to home ownership by making it easier for more families to get a mortgage. We're going to ban foreign investors from buying homes here if they are not planning to move into Canada. There's so much more we can do, but in the short period of time allotted for the response, those are the points I wanted to get across, at least initially. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa. Next is Adam.
Yeah, indeed, there's so many things that we have to do, but let's just focus on some of the things very precisely. First of all, remember that high housing prices are a cause of poverty, and poverty is bad for the economy. New Democrats plan to create at least 500,000 units of quality, affordable housing over the next 10 years, with half of it done within the first 5 years. We're going to work with the cities to build the appropriate kind of housing for the city. Young people have a hard time being able to afford to live in Richmond Hill, and there are a tremendous number of seniors on waiting lists for affordable housing in Richmond Hill. But I do look forward to working with the city on making sure that we get the mix just right. We will waive the federal portion of the GST on construction of new affordable rental units. And we'll also introduce a 20% foreign buyers tax on residential real estate and keep international speculators out of the market with a registry of ultimate ownership, just like they've done in BC.
Thanks, Adam. Majid.
Thank you. That's another amazing question. This is one of the top issues in this writing, housing. So really we have 3 issues. Number one is we don't have enough capacity. So we need to create capacity, which means we need to create more homes for people or apartments for more people. Second of all, we have to make sure people can afford it. So we need to put incentives in place to be able to help them afford or get their down payment. And finally, we need to work with developers to free up lands and municipalities and province to free up land so developers can build those affordable housing. So what are we doing? We're going to refurbish using some of our green funding. We're going to build new housing to the tune of about 1 million units. We are freeing up land. We are limiting foreign investment. That's, as I mentioned, we are easing the development. We're removing some of the red tapes. And what we're doing is, most important thing is we are introducing rent-to-own program and also a 10% down payment and $40,000 of tax-free account that you could use as your down payment.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Kenny, and the first person to answer will be Adam.
This question is about tax policy. Okay, since few years ago, the tax rules for the small, especially for the small business, has been getting more complicated. That is harmful for business expansion and also making passing the business to the next generations more difficult. So if your party is going to be elected as government, are you committed to make this tax rule more simplified and more reasonable?
In a nutshell, yes, I am looking forward to that discussion. Want to hear specifics with you. It's well known that certain kinds of tax policies give a relative advantage to one large business over a collection of small businesses. But a collection of small businesses with the same total economic output has a much better growth, much better resilience, and a much stronger economy. Our focus with respect to tax policy for the moment is to make sure that we leave the small business tax rate alone, so that you do not get, you're not paying for the tax cuts that were given to very rich companies in the past and did not create jobs.
Thank you, Adam. Our next person is Majid.
Great question. So what has happened for small businesses? Right after that, in 2015, we reduced the taxes, the federal portion, from 12% to 9.5%. So we reduced their taxes on that. We introduced a number of elements to ease up on some of the red tapes for the small businesses. We've also made a lot of investment on small businesses through what? Through investment in green technology, through investment in innovation, through funding for research and development. So, and also help them finance some of their trades, a possibility to be able to do a lot of trade promotion. So when you look at it, we've reduced the taxes on the small business. So we'll continue working on that. We will invest. We will provide incentives for small businesses to focus on areas that's helping the economy grow, such as green recovery. And as well, we have made sure that they have access to a huge market through all of these international free trade agreements that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you. And Costa, you're muted, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. I mean, that's an excellent question. The one thing conservatives are known for, we don't raise taxes. It's not surprising that you've seen taxes go up. It's not surprising that we'll see them go up even more. Even we see in a liberal plan, a liberal candidate recently say that there's a plan to tax people's primary residences when they sell it. I mean, it's ridiculous the degree to which they will go. As conservatives, we know we need to help our small business sector. We know we need to help every Canadian family and all Canadians. We will launch the Rebuild Main Street tax credit. This will provide a 25% tax credit on amounts of up to $100,000 that Canadians personally invest in small businesses over the next 2 years. This will give a strong incentive for Canadians to invest their money to help entrepreneurs rebuild our country. Will enable the middle-class investors to participate in the rebound, all the while helping our Canadian economy. And we pledge and promise we will never, ever, ever touch people's homes or tax them the way the Liberals are flirting around doing, starting with this particular platform that they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Cheryl, and the first person to answer will be Majid.
Thank you. This question is on housing. I know sometimes all the questions sound similar, but it's a bit different. Some of the most significant barriers to building new housing supply are local and provincial regulation and red tape. If elected, how will your government work with the provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to address these barriers to new housing supply?
Great question. I think I touched on that in my last response. But what we need to do, we need to naturally make sure that we work with all our partners, provincial, municipal, and the developers who are in that ecosystem to make sure that we increase the supply. We also need to make sure that we free up lands. Those are current lands from the federal government, provincial lands, as well as some of the municipality lands, to make sure that lands are available, because a large portion of the cost of the houses coming from the land. We also need to make sure that we close some of the loopholes, as I call it, or protect the right of the buyers, educate them, make sure that we end blind bidding. And we also got to make sure that we have a program that it's rent to own. But the most important thing is also working with developers to ensure that they use the latest green technology to ensure that they can make sure that they develop affordable and yet green houses for our people.
Okay, Costa?
Thank you. Another excellent question. We need to work very closely with our provincial partners across the country, with municipalities across the country. And we need to encourage foreign investment in affordable, purpose-built rental housing for Canadians. We need to stabilize the real estate market by increasing the number of homes being built and addressing unfair and corrupt practices that have driven up prices, such as money laundering. We want to address the soaring cost of renting a home by partnering with the municipalities and the private sector to bring new rental units into the market. We want to be a reliable partner in addressing the housing needs of Indigenous communities and implement a for Indigenous, by Indigenous housing strategy in the spirit of reconciliation. We need to work together collaboratively to deliver results. It's one thing to go through an election campaign and make promises just to get elected and then break them one after another after another. As conservatives, we tick off the list of the promises we make. When we're elected, we'll get the job done.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Adam, you're up next. I apologize.
All right, just patiently waiting my turn. So one of the themes in the NDP platforms for many years and in many ways is that we're going to work with stakeholders that are there. Housing and zoning, of course, are provincial responsibilities. And whenever you see an NDP platform that says we're going to work with the provinces to do this, there's a provincial NDP section with a platform that says we're going to work with the federal government to do this. So we greatly believe in provincial and federal cooperation. There are some things. We are open to innovative paths to home ownership and, of course, making homes available, some market and some non-market. A new Democrat government will provide resources to facilitate co-housing, such as a model of co-ownership agreements and connection to local resources, and will ease access to financing by offering CMHC-backed ownership on co-mortgages. Of course, we do plan on implementing a 20% foreign buyers tax to reduce the number of money launderers, not money launderers. The next thing is for money launderers, basically foreign speculators that are driving up prices. We're also going to create a public registry of beneficial ownership so that we can have transparency on who actually owns the properties. And we'll be able to report suspicious transaction because we will know who actually owns the properties.
Thank you, Adam. Okay. Next up, we have Glenn, and the first person to answer that question will be Costa.
Yes, this is a question that I received to give to you tonight, and it's kind of a disturbing question. It is: clean, safe drinking water has been promised over and over by successive governments for all Indigenous communities. When will this happen? What will your party do to address this issue?
Thank you, Glenn. It is truly disgraceful that nothing has happened to resolve that very, very important issue, despite the promise made by the current Prime Minister in 2015 that he would do that. The Conservative Party supports treaty rights and the process of reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. It is important that we provide First Nations people with clean drinking water and boiling water advisories in the reserves. There are children right now that have never turned on the tap and poured a glass of water from the tap. They have to boil the water. They don't know the difference. We want to provide economic opportunities and support for education for more Indigenous peoples. We're going to work together with Indigenous leaders in every Indigenous community across the country, with all of the nations, to invest federal money to ensure that they get clean drinking water in their communities once and for all. It is disgraceful that a country like this in 2021 still is not able to provide clean drinking water to millions of people across the country.
Thank you. And next is Adam. Unmute. Oh, there you go.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, so I guess I'm the only one here that hasn't been in a government that has not made drinking water for Native peoples actually happen and ended the boil water advisories for the whole country. Do Democrats believe that it is past time for the federal government to step up and fully fund the services and infrastructure that Indigenous communities need to thrive? It's an important part of the responsibility that Canada owes to Indigenous peoples, given the deep intergenerational impacts of colonialism. This means making full investments required to ensure clean water and lift all drinking water advisories for good right now, not years from now, and supporting Indigenous-led water management training programs and water system operations as an immediate priority. This means funding on reserve, emergency management, and prevention, including firefighting, training, and equipment. It also means ensuring safe public transportation by resuming and expanding rural and remote bus routes and passenger services, of course. If you can't get the equipment you need to fix your waterworks, you can't fix your waterworks. So it's important that we're able to get the training, the resources, and the funding where it needs to be. And of course, and always when dealing with Indigenous peoples, it's a nation-to-nation relationship. So it's working together.
Thank you, Adam. And Majid.
Glenn, thank you for that great question. First of all, our government has committed and continue to commit investing in empowering Indigenous communities. Specifically as to the water advisory, our record over the last 6 years has been we've eliminated 178 short-term advisory before it becomes long-term advisory. We've invested $400 million being allocated to First Nation economic and cultural fund to support community level efforts, and lifted almost all the action. We've developed an action plan to lift all the long-term drinking advisory. Currently, as you know, there's 51 advisory that's still in place, but we are committed to work on that. On other fronts, we are committing to further $2 billion in Indigenous housing, because if you don't have a house, there is no point having, having the infrastructure to be able to get the clean waters there. And we are also committing to supporting them, supporting the Indigenous communities through another $2 billion of distinction-based mental health support, as well as stop. Okay, here we go.
Thanks, Majid. Our next question will come from Yo-Yo, and our first person to answer that question is Adam.
Thank you again, Jenny. So the party leaders, federal leaders, they have differences on gun control legislation. What's your personal position on this issue? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I've always wanted to get this question. To start off with, I'm going to point out that we need to start looking at gun control in a much more deep way than simply banning this kind of weapon or that kind of weapon. Okay, we do agree with Jack Layton's initial let the cities decide to ban handguns or not. And of course, there are details about specific weapons, but the technology is coming for 3D printers to make guns. So simply preventing people from getting them is kind of yesterday's solution, and time is running out on that. We need to have a better look at our social policies. The other thing about gun control, as I want to point out, the body count says the leading cause of death by guns is suicide. So if you want to reduce gun deaths, we have to look at mental health, and we have to fund mental health. And of course, this might be unpopular to say amongst some people, but the body count says a gun in the home is more dangerous to the people that live there than to anybody else.
Thanks, Adam. Our next person to answer is Majid.
Thank you. Great question. As you know, as a Canadian, and our community's safety is of utmost importance to us. What we've done is we've introduced legislation to ban assault weapons, which seems some parties, i.e. conservatives, are trying to dismantle that. We've made broad investment in securing our borders to make sure that cross-border of transportation of handguns especially is being managed. We're working with provinces to help them, if they choose to do so, to ban handguns. We're introducing a buyback program for helping or ensuring that any type of assault rifle is basically rendered useless. We're investing in community education. We are addressing some of the social determinants of economies, such as housing affordability. We are protecting the right of also the gun owners, the rightful gun owners who are trying to make sure that they have access to gun for hunting. We are also supporting those who are dealing with mental health, so they can be in a right mental status to be able to continue on their lives.
Thank you. And next to Costa.
Thank you, Yo-Yo. That's an excellent question. We know that gun violence is up record high over the last 6 years. It's never been this high in every urban area across the country. The Liberals have done very little. In fact, they're demonizing law-abiding firearms owners, while at the same time introducing new measures to reduce sentencing for criminals. There's a disconnect there. The Conservative government will maintain a long-standing ban on assault weapons. We will maintain a ban on the number of other firearms that were reclassified in 2020. We're going to conduct a transparent review of the firearms reclassification process to take the politics out of the process and engage the public in decisions with respect to public safety. The review will be nonpartisan and will focus on the capabilities of the firearms and not how it looks. All Canadians will be invited to participate in the review process. We are not participating in these wedge issue, micro political games that some of the liberal candidates and liberal leaders are engaging in. We're going to get the job done.
Thank you, Costa. Our next, I just want to remind everybody, we are going to go to audience questions shortly. So if you have not, but you want to ask something, please submit it to the email address questions4, as in number 4, rh@yahoo.com. We are sorting those and we will be getting to those. Our next question will come from Kenny, and the first person to answer is Majid.
Hi, we are all increasingly concerned with climate change because now we have more hot weather, tornadoes, and fires. But in order to improve the environment, we will need to pay more tax, and also all the business will have additional costs for all these environmental protections. So if your party will be elected government, how are you going to reduce the burden on business? And how can you balance all this concern?
Thank you for that great question. Let's start that climate change is real. You mentioned that the fires, extreme temperatures we are getting, the flooding that we had recently in New York. So what we're trying to do, we are trying to identify the sources of pollution and the polluters, and we're going to work with them to make sure that we provide incentives into working with them to reduce the level of emissions. For example, we have put price on pollution. We are providing incentive for large emitter organizations to make sure that they improve their processes so they can eliminate emission. We are also setting clear targets for our 2030 as well as 2050. We are making investment in green jobs. We are focusing on renewable energy. We're focusing on revitalizing the economy. And we are also investing in electrical vehicles. For those organizations who are focusing on green technology, we provide the tax incentive and opportunity to be able to write off a lot of the expenses as it related to the upgrades that they're doing.
Thank you. All right, next is Costa.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Kenny. Excellent questions. Canada's Conservative has a serious plan to combat climate change that allows us to meet our targets and reduce emissions by 2030, all the while repealing some of the measures that have been put in place that have been so ineffective. I need to remind folks that back in 2015, Canada was emitting 723 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. A promise then by Justin Trudeau was that he would reduce that by 17% by 2020. In fact, it's gone up to 730 million tons. You can't suck and blow at the same time. You have to get the job done. An independent analysis conducted by Navius Research found that the Conservative plan will effectively achieve the same emissions reductions as the government's current plan in 2030 while resulting in a boost to jobs and the economy. We have a plan that is credible, that is achievable. It's important that we come up with these plans, that we achieve the targets. We just don't blurt out the words during an election campaign, and then nothing happens. We've seen in the last 6 years, nothing has happened.
Thank you, Costa. And last, Adam.
Of course, New Democrats have the most aggressive plan to reduce emissions out of the major parties for election here. The world is moving to electric cars, and our technology systems are changing. So my message to small business and business in general is we have to look at this as an opportunity to upgrade our technology. When I was in school, they used to say, anything that you put up the smokestack is something that you bought that you didn't sell. Pollution is waste and inefficiency. We have plans, of course, to offer incentives to help upgrade to electric vehicles. We also have plans to help cities upgrade their electric fleets to their city vehicles and transit. Now, this means lower operating costs for your cities, and that should trickle down a little bit to lower cost of business. We also plan on giving low interest rate loans to help subsidize renovation of buildings. So the plan is to eliminate your carbon tax by eliminating your carbon footprint.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Okay, at this point, I want to go to audience questions because we've had a number come in. Just if you could, I just want to clarify, I guess the first question we will ask is, as voters, we hear only how the respective parties are going to spend our tax dollars to address all the various programs, which is great. What is each party's solution to increase revenue for the government to reduce the future tax burden on us, our children, grandchildren, and future generations of Canadians? So that is the question. And our first person to answer will be Costa. Do you want me to repeat that question?
Yes, please.
As voters, we hear only how the respective parties are going to spend our tax dollars to address all the various programs. What is each party's solution to increase revenue for the government to reduce the future tax burden on us, our children, grandchildren, and future generations of Canadians?
Our plan is to create jobs. We're going to start by bringing in back the million jobs that were lost. Governments don't create jobs by themselves. They create an atmosphere in which jobs can be created. We want people employed. We're going to invest in infrastructure, invest in transportation, a very much needed thing. And right here in Richmond Hill, we all know we're nestled in the heart of the GTA and what that means for us on a daily basis. We're going to invest in our communities across the country, get Canada back to work, and we're going to focus on reducing that the budget, bringing it back to balance within 10 years. It's a reasonable target. Conservatives have done it before. The last time, I might remind everyone that the budget was balanced was 2015. That was the very year that the Liberals promised these teeny little deficits of $10 billion. Not only 3 months after they made that promise, it was a $30 billion deficit. We can't keep adding to the debt in the country without focusing on creating jobs, improving the economy of the country so that we can increase the revenue that all of that generates. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Adam.
Thank you. As you know, you can't balance the books if you're sabotaging revenues with tax cuts. This is a long-standing issue. The no strings attached tax cuts that Liberal and Conservative governments have handed out to profitable corporations have not translated into more business investments or good jobs for Canadians. Despite that, the Liberals have kept Harper's tax cuts. In uncertain time, corporate tax cuts just add to dead money. In the worst case, windfall tax cuts to the very richest give seed money for speculative bubbles. Over the decades, there's been a big trend of moving taxes off of the rich and the companies they own and on to everybody else. We plan on starting to reverse that trend. We will return our corporate tax rates to the 2010 levels while leaving the small business tax rate alone. We'll increase income tax on incomes over $210,000 by only 2 points, but it's a step in the right direction. 1% wealth tax on net fortunes over $10 million. And we have to look at the capital gains tax.
Thank you, Adam. And next, Majid.
Well, thank you for the great question. So how does the government, where does the government of Canada's revenue come from? It comes from taxes. Where the taxes come from? It comes from people who have jobs. So naturally for us, the first and foremost thing is to create jobs. As I said, we've already recovered 92% of the jobs that were lost pre-pandemic. There are certain sections that, such as tourism and travel and tourism, that we're investing about $1 billion. The next thing we're doing is we're reducing the taxes on the middle class, which we've already done. We are also making sure that we have fair participation for key segment of our country and key segments of our population, i.e. women. We know every time women is in a leadership position, the productivity goes up by about 30%. So through the $10 daycare program that we are rolling, we are ensuring that we have more women participation. With more women participation, more job, stronger economic growth and faster economic growth. And we are also going to finish the fight against pandemic with make sure that our economy can open up much faster.
Thank you. Our next question, which can be answered first by Adam, is more than 18 Canadians die every day from opioid medications. Why are politicians not talking more about the opioid crisis, and how would you deal with it?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's when you look at the number of people that die each day, that's just astounding. And it's definitely a tragedy. I've been talking about this for a number of times. Ways that we have to deal with this crisis. Number one, we have to stop looking at the issue of addiction as a criminal injustice problem. If you're addicted to something, you need to see a doctor, not a lawyer. So we're going to move to decriminalize some things. The other, drug abuse is a social problem. Drug addiction is a medical problem. Okay, and often it starts with undiagnosed mental health problems that people self-diagnose or they self-medicate. Now that sometimes ends up as alcohol, sometimes illicit drugs, because the pain is too deep. We have a comprehensive plan to bring mental health into the public healthcare system so that everybody who is not covered now can get taken care of.
Thank you. Majid?
Great question. The opioid crisis is out of control. So what do we need to do? First of all, we need to make sure that we have programs that limit type of access and also provide safe environment for the administration and recovery of recovery of the issue that you're dealing with. Next, we need to make sure that we roll out programs that deal with the social determinant that drives you into using opioid. Those could be the housing, could be jobs, could be food, and also the state of the mental health you're in, or the state of the care that you need dealing with pain. So when we roll out programs in support of improving our healthcare system, making sure that we provide more funding for the provinces, these are all supporting in dealing with the opioid crisis.
Thank you. And Costa.
Yes, this is a very important and very serious question. Every day, 17 Canadians die from opiate-related deaths. In fact, since the onset of COVID-19, opiate-related deaths have doubled in Canada. Families across the country are mourning loved ones from the opioid crisis, that they've lost. To help those struggling with addiction and save lives, Canada's recovery plan, our conservative plan, will invest $325 million over the next 3 years to create 1,000 residential drug treatment beds and build 50 recovery community centers across the country. We're going to enhance the delivery of culturally appropriate addiction treatment and prevention services in First Nations communities with high needs. We're going to provide $1 billion over 5 years to boost funding for Indigenous mental health and drug treatment programs. We're going to partner with the provinces to ensure that Naxolone kits are available and free across Canada. We're going to reorient the Canadian drug and substance strategy towards ensuring that every person struggling with addiction has the opportunity to recover. As a country, we must recognize that mental health is health.
Thank you. Our next question. With Canada's inflation numbers coming out tomorrow, and that generally economists expect that this will hover at the 3.9% level, the highest figure since the early 2000s, an easy fix would be to hike the interest rates, regardless of the comments that there will be no increases to 2023. Such a move would have an effect of slowing the real estate market, and commentators say lowering prices in Richmond Hill and GTA. Would this help your housing strategy in any way? Our first person to answer this question is Majid.
Well, when you look at the challenges that we've gone through over the last 18 months and the challenges that we need to, and the program that we need to roll out over the next 18 months and if not 18 years, what we could see is that our inflation as it relates to the inflation in other countries has maintained well, and it's not really out of control. The fact that the government of the Bank of Canada has made a commitment to hold the interest rates low, and by ensuring it's helping to make sure that our economic recovery is strong. Also, when you look at what we've done in making sure that we could service the deficit that we have or the debt that we have, we've made a long-term investment, and we've ensured that the costs associated with servicing the debt is fixed. So if the cost of the debt is fixed, if we have made sure that the interest rate stays low and we provide all the incentives that we provided as it relates to the housing, I think we're going to be in a strong position to weather the challenges.
Thank you. Costa?
Yes, thank you for the question. Canadians can ill afford higher interest rates and higher taxes, especially at this juncture. We're already dealing with a crisis in the economy. We know that when interest rates go up, the government has no other source of revenue other than to go to the taxpayer, and our taxes will end up going up. To make mortgages more affordable, we as conservatives will encourage a new market in 7 to 10-year mortgages to provide stability both for first-time home buyers and lenders, opening another secure path to home ownership for Canadians, and reducing the need for mortgage stress tests. We're going to remove the requirement to conduct a stress test when a homeowner renews a mortgage with another lender, instead of only when staying with their current lender, as is the case today. This will increase competition and help homeowners access more affordable options. It's we need to be very careful that we focus a lot on helping young people have the opportunity to move in homes in the communities in which they grew up in, something that sadly today they cannot do.
Thank you. And Adam.
Thank you for the question. So it's a couple of things. Historically, increasing interest rates to fight inflation unnecessarily is how Brian Mulroney caused the recession of the 1990s. It was called the Made in Canada recession, and eventually the Americans caught up. Traditionally, inflation of below 5% is not considered a problem, so there is no need to panic. Now, we may be in a period of short-lived inflation due to COVID disrupting supply chains. When people go home instead of working, the ability to produce goods, take lumber for example, is reduced. I'm not one who really knows a lot about how lumber mills work, but I imagine that is an in-person job. So there is, of course, we're all home. Have you seen the price of wood this year? Well, we're all renovating because we're home. So high demand, disrupted supply chains. There's a good chance that inflation will come down once we've dealt with the pandemic. So no, it's not time to do a knee-jerk reaction to interest rates. That could be very dangerous for our housing market, as a lot of precarious people could be on the edge.
Thank you. The next question and the first person to answer will be Costa. Can you please clarify your party's position on how we should react to the recently discovered mass graves of Indigenous children in residential schools?
Yes, I certainly can. Thank you so much for that important question. Canada's Conservatives acknowledge the deep sorrow and mourning that all Indigenous people and survivors of residential schools are experiencing. Our hearts grieve for the Indigenous communities who are sharing this trauma. These discoveries are a somber reminder of the devastating harmful effects that the residential schools had and still have on many survivors today, and they need to be addressed. We as Conservatives have called for a swift timeline and funding to deliver on the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action 71 to 76, involving missing children and providing healing for families. We need to work with Indigenous leaders, come up with a solution that is acceptable to the Indigenous communities, that will bring closure to, as much as possible, to this issue. It's unconscionable to think that children were buried at the school where they were going. Who can possibly justify in any way, shape, or form at any time in Canada's history that it was okay to bury children on the school grounds and in the way that they were? We need to work with Indigenous leadership to help bring proper closure to this matter.
Thank you. And next up is Adam.
So a vital part of reconciliation is fully acknowledging the horror and harm caused to Indigenous children, their families, and communities by the residential school system. These institutions systemically remove children from their families and inflicted abuse, sickness, and death. The recent revelations of thousands of mass graves and unmarked graves at residential school sites across the country underlines the depth of the horror that this genocidal policy inflicted for more than 160 years. I came across a stat once that said if you enlisted in the Canadian Forces in World War II, you had about the same chance of surviving as one of these kids. It's time to find every child and bring them home. A new Democrat government will fully fund the search for grave sites at former residential schools, as well as the maintenance, commemoration, and reburial and protection of the residential school cemeteries, according to the wishes of the Indigenous families, residential school survivors, and communities. We will work with the First Nations and survivors to establish memorials to the lost children.
Thank you, Adam. Majid?
Thank you for the question. First of all, the news of the residential school children was devastating in Canada, and it was also devastating to me as someone who came to Canada 42 years ago and seeked all the opportunities that that was presented to me. We need to make sure to start with the formal and meaningful acknowledgement that these events has happened and continue on the path of truth and reconciliation. We need to act with respect. We need to make sure that we have meaningful engagement. We need to make sure that our relationship is bilateral and it's a nation to nation. We need to make sure that we are full participant in this process, and we need sure that there is fair compensation for the Indigenous. Now, as part of what we could do, we've made an announcement of $2 billion in distinction-based mental health support for the communities, and also commitment that we will get to the bottom of this and make sure that there is a fair compensation.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll go to our closing arguments. What is your party doing? Oh, and I will accommodate the first person to answer this one will be Adam. What is your party doing for protection of minorities, especially Muslims, against Islamophobia? Adam?
Thank you for the question. There's a lot that can and should be done. New Democrats have got a proud record of standing up for Islamophobia and the work against it. In 2001, well, my political opponents predecessors were passing laws allowing longer detention and reducing civil liberties. The NDP leader, Alexa McDonough, was making the fight against racism the #1 fight for the NDP. Specifically in this platform, we intend to make sure that local police forces for our large cities have dedicated hate crime units, because it's totally unacceptable and ridiculous that in a free country like this, people would have to be scared to go and worship. We have freedom of religion here. We have freedom of movements. People should be safe.
Thank you. And Majid.
Well, first of all, let's acknowledge that COVID-19 has hit us on many fronts. This has the front that's been impacted us probably in the area of hatred and in the area of racism is not gone unnoticed. Naturally, any Islamophobia through some of the acts of violence that we have seen has raised its ugly head. We have made a commitment to make sure that we address Islamophobia. We have held consultation with a number of Muslim community leaders. We are starting a secretariat so we can have a continued dialogue and direct contact with the government. But we are also fighting racism and any type of hate on many fronts, whether it's Islamophobia, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's anti-Black racism, whether it's anti-Asian racism, whether it's some of the visible minorities that they are impacted. It is time for us to go back to the true values that the Canadian uphold.
Thank you. And Costa.
Canada is the most welcoming country in the world. It's a country that is built on welcoming people from every possible country, from every corner in the world that have chosen to call this their country. There should be one common, if there is one common characteristic of all parties, and should be for all particular leaders and all participants in the political process, is that there should be zero tolerance for Islamophobia, zero tolerance for anti-Semitism, zero tolerance for attacks on the Black community, zero tolerance for what we've seen disgracefully against the Asian community, especially with the advent of the pandemic. It's not the Canadian way. In Canada, we are tolerant, we are accepting, we are loving of all of our neighbors. We need to work together as community leaders, as politicians, as business leaders, as teachers, as business people, to ensure that these folks that perpetuate hatred of any kind, Islamophobia and all others, are marginalized and put in their place. We need to stamp out all forms of racism in our society. I think you're muted.
Thank you. See, I told you guys you had to make sure you kept me on track too. I really appreciate that. I was just going to say that we have a number of questions. We've tried to cover a variety of topics. I'm going to have one more question asked by Cheryl. Are you going to say no?
Yes, I'm going to say no. I'm good. It has been covered.
Okay, I'm
the
glad.
candidates have spoke about it.
Okay,
Yes,
we've been
thank
trying
you.
to cover all the topics, people. That's why we're doing this. So what I'm going to do at this point is we are going to go to our closing statements, the 2-minute closing statements. I'm also, afterwards, we'll do a bit of a closing. I'll introduce a couple of items. But what I'd like to do is we're going to do the exact opposite order that we did at the beginning. So we will start with Costa, and then Majid, and then Adam. So Costa, I will turn it over to you for your 2-minute closing statement, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in just 6 days, Canadians will be asked to make a very important choice. The difference between the political parties are stark. Our diverse nation has always been a bright example and the envy of many all over the world. It pains me to see that Canada's Prime Minister has abandoned people that have helped us in Afghanistan, ignored the fact that we are in the midst of the 4th wave of the pandemic, and has embroiled us in an unnecessary and unwanted election. Clearly, he saw an opportunity to hoodwink Canadians and run away with a majority government. He is thinking only about himself and not about the Canadian people. Broken campaign promises, higher taxes for the middle class, runaway deficits, threatening the sustainability of social programs, combined with a lack of transparency, masked in the art of deflection, have resulted in the loss of credibility of this Liberal government, and Canadians do not want more of the same. A new Conservative government, we will secure jobs for recovering the 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic. We will secure accountability for enacting a new anti-corruption law to clean up the mess in Ottawa. We'll secure mental health through our Canada Mental Health Action Plan. We're going to secure our country by creating a strategic stockpile of essential products and building the capacity to manufacture vaccines right here at home. We're going to secure Canada's economy by balancing the budget over the next decade. We will work with the provinces to implement innovative, reasonable, and achievable national environmental plans to fight climate change. We will support treaty rights and the process of reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. We will help seniors stay in their homes, improve their quality of long-term care, and maintain the financial security of their pensions. We will give small businesses the support they need to get on their feet, and so much more. This coming Monday, September 20th, I am asking for your support, and I promise to work every day on your behalf. Richmond Hill deserves a strong voice in Parliament. My name is Costas Menegakis, and I am humbly asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Costas. Next is Majid. 2
Thank
minutes.
you. Dear friends and fellow residents of Richmond Hill, over the last 18 months, we've lived in uncertainty. So it's only natural that we look towards certainty, safety, and security in our daily lives. One may ask how this certainty may look like. In my perspective, certainty is characterized in two aspects: proven leadership and a plan that works. We need strong leadership with proven track record and a clear vision for the next 4 years, but also for generations to come. We also need a plan that's clear, encompassing, and pragmatic to address the need and the gaps that has been highlighted and has been exacerbated by the recent pandemic. One only needs to look at the path taken by the Liberal government over the last 18 months and our plan for the next 18 months, which will help pave the path for future generations to come. I would like to reiterate that both the leadership and our actions have been the envy of the world. This is a proven and fact-based statement. We are keeping all Canadians safe through our vaccination procurement and rollout. We have recovered 92% of pre-pandemic levels and moving rapidly to fully reopen the economy. We've also had your back from day one. We've made sure that we roll out support programs that speeds up, but never that's been never seen before. Now, one may ask, how does certainty looks like in the next 18 months, 4 years, or 18 years? During the tonight debate, you've heard how would certainty look like from many aspects, whether it's support for families, seniors, youth, small businesses, affordability, environment, addressing the increasing hatredism and racism. I ask you on September 20th to support me and support the Liberal Party of Canada. It's been an honor and privilege to represent you over the last 6 years, and I look forward to continuing representing you in the next mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Majid. And Adam, 2 minutes.
2021 should not have been an election year. This election is over 2 years early. We are here because of a flaw in the first past the post electoral system. A 3% swing in support can turn a minority into a 39% majority. So the Prime Minister spent $600 million and risked public health and safety. The NDP is the only major party that has tried to avoid a federal election during this pandemic. In May 2020, Jagmeet Singh called on Justin Trudeau to introduce paid sick leave. He said, provinces need to look at the way to deliver sick leave directly through their employers, which the federal government can't do. Mr. Trudeau waited until August 2021 to suddenly admit that the federal government can fund paid leave. This is the kind of cynical politics that we must end. We have a Stephen Harper-era candidate with a Conservative leader who wants to convince you that he is dragging his party kicking and screaming into the 21st century. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have a record of fighting for you. Instead of protecting billion-dollar companies that profited off the pandemic and paid no tax, they have fought for you and your family, pushing the Liberal government to supports that helped regular Canadians and small businesses get through the pandemic. It was the NDP that made CERB $2,000 a month, so people could shelter at home instead of food and rent forcing them to risk their lives. It is the NDP forcing the government to keep this anti-COVID assistance in place on a disease having its own schedule, not a politician's wishful schedule. New Democrats are offering a serious plan to help Canadians upgrade their skills and technology to fight the climate crisis. We're offering dental care, vision care, and a drug plan that will help people afford the care they need in an unstable world and help Canadian small business. It starts by voting for Adam DeVita, Jagmeet Singh, and the NDP.
Thank you very much, Adam. I want to just end with a couple closing remarks. I first of all want to thank our candidates, because without them, where would we be? They take a lot of time and effort, and I applaud them for all their efforts and their answering, and for a very professional showing this evening, as we discussed earlier. Thank you for all your time, because I know it takes a lot to do it. I want to thank our panelists for donating their time to ask the questions, and the organizations that have helped to put this together: the Richmond Hill Board of Trade, the Markham Richmond Hill Vaughan Chinese Business Association, the Rotary Club of Richmond Hill, the Liberal York Region Media, and onrichmondhill.com. I want to thank especially the attendees for coming. I hope you got some information out of this. I apologize that we couldn't ask every single question that came in. Even the panelists didn't get to ask all theirs as well, but we really feel it's important to try to cover all the issues. I encourage you to reach out to all your candidates. Those that weren't able to come tonight represent a few other parties, but the point is these three people have taken the time and they're happy to answer your questions. So please reach out if those questions weren't answered. And I want to thank you all. Please get out and vote. Please encourage all your neighbors to. That's the only way we can make a difference. So thank you for your time this evening, everyone. Have a wonderful night.